Every organization, when it's making a purchase, goes through a process. Now, that process might be very well defined, or it might be very poorly defined, depending on the organization that you're dealing with. But we can take that kind of process and we can boil it down into some key component parts that are fairly typical in terms of any business and how they operate. And this diagram here is a representation. And I like to call it the buying cycle because that makes it specific to the customer, specific to the client, specific to the individual or group of individuals that you're trying to help. So the buying cycle starts with the identification of a problem. So it goes from being everything's fine and dandy to, right, we have a problem. The next stage is, well, is it a big problem? How significant is that? Does everyone see it as a problem? And if it is seen as significant enough and it is recognized by enough stakeholders, does it warrant taking some action? So that's kind of stage one, moving from a situation where, so that's stage one, moving from a situation where you don't perceive there to be any issue to have identified an issue or a problem that you need to take action to resolve. Stage two is about exploring the solutions, exploring what options do we have to solve this? What options do we have internally? What options are there in the market? What criteria should we be using to make that decision? And which provider best meets those criteria that we decided upon? So that's stage two. The third stage is about addressing concerns. What risks are there that we're taking by making this decision? What happens if the solution doesn't work? What happens if there's an issue along the way? What happens, or do we trust the preferred supplier? Is there that level of trust, that level of relationship there that gives us confidence? These are presented here in a kind of natural order, 1, 2, 3, but they're not necessarily linear. Clients can jump from 1 to 3 very quickly and then back to 2. They can jump from 2 to 1 and they can decide it's just not a problem. So this is not a one-way system and it's not necessarily linear. And that's why when you are conducting your sales discovery and sales process, you need to be testing across all of these different areas throughout your conversations with your client. Stage 4 is supplier selection. So typically this is where a decision's made and contract or an agreement is executed against. And this can become, particularly with large enterprises, very involved. Who actually has the authority to sign? Is there budget? How do you release finance to pay for it? What legal terms are around it? What payment terms? Do we have an MSA? So on and so forth. So it can get very nitty gritty and very it's not as simple as we've made a decision, we'll push it through. So particularly in enterprise, you need to be across the detail of that. And then the final part, the solution ownership, this is where the client takes delivery of their product or solution, they implement it, and those questions that we'll ask there are, how quickly will we see value? Are we getting value? Does it achieve everything that's promised? And assuming that's the case and it's implemented fine, there are typically always some kind of hiccups. There's always that kind of slight disillusionment after the honeymoon of making a decision. But assuming that broadly meets the value criteria that were laid down, the next thing that happens is changes over time. Solution ownership, customer owns the solution or the product, and in 3, 6, 9, 12, 24, 36 months, something will change and there will be a new problem, challenge, issue, as there inevitably is. And then you're back at the beginning, you're going from that unconsciously there's an issue to consciously having to find an issue, as in problem one. And that is why we refer to it as a buying cycle.